Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of Omniu Presents the H3O Art of Life show. I was just sitting here reading the paper, even though I have a studio full of guests, because I was reading about Northeastern Illinois University, and I was reading a quote from Sherry Frost, who was a graduate of Northeastern Illinois University, who won the Golden Apple Award in 2000. She has a BS and an MS degree from Northeastern. And she says, Northeastern Illinois University was a school for me. I wanted to teach. Northeastern Illinois University is where you go to learn to teach. And I just want to edit that a little bit to say Northeastern Illinois University Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies is a place where you go to learn to teach. And I know because I'm a witness, because I used to be a professor there. And I worked with colleagues who were among the best in any university anywhere, and I'm a world traveler. Having said all of that, I want to introduce you to some of the people who are associated in various capacities with Northeastern Illinois University. I'll just say their names, and then I'll come back around and we'll meet them. I want to introduce, you know, I claim everybody's children, so I claim this young man, Professor Josef Ben Levi, as my son, and he reciprocates by claiming me as his mom, so it's all good. He's professor at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. He's also a priest in the Temple for the African Community of Chicago, the Temple of the African Community of Chicago, and he's also associated in some capacity with the Comedic Institute, which is also housed in the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. So he wears a lot of crowns at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. Next to him is Lemont Baker, who actually has a radio show. He's a radio show host at Northeastern Illinois University, and we're going to learn some more about him and what he does with it, because I don't think they had a radio show when I was teaching there, so this must be new. So we'll find out about that. Kimbu Kali, who is Gerald Vernon with a civilian name. And I'm never going to call him Gerald Vernon except this one time, so, you know, I can do the right thing. But Kimbu Kali / Gerald Vernon is the portal to the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. You probably see him first because he's the person who is in the Office of Admissions, Recruitment, Retention. Is that enough?
Records.
And records, right. I know it's OARR. And so he's in charge of seeing to it that students not only come into the university at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, but also responsible for seeing to it that they stay there long enough to get the documents and the credentials that they came to acquire, and then that they are able to go to their next location successfully. And last but not least, because ladies always first, I have to introduce my daughter, because I claim everybody's children, and if they claim me back, it's done. So this is Donna, Kunza, Gentry, who is just a new person, new kid on the block at Northeastern Illinois University's Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. And she came there as a result, in some part, of my pleading, because being one of the top 20 students in the junior college graduates in the country and the top junior college graduate in the state of Illinois, she was sought after by a number of institutions. And when I found out that we were about to lose this prize, then I called up my friends and said, you know, we got to get her in there because she'll be an asset to the institution. So that's all my guests here today. And now I'm going to ask Kimbu to talk. Well, do I have to call you Gerald Vernon?
No, please don't.
Please don't. Okay. I'm going to ask Kimbu to talk something about the recruitment process, you know, how we get the students in and how we explain the Carruthers Center of Inner City Studies to the new students, because most people don't really know what it is that satellite of Northeastern Illinois University is about.
Okay, well, the admissions process is fairly simple. For the undergraduate students, it requires that they either complete high school or have a GED. If they're under the age of 21, they are required to take either the ACT or SAT test. However, we have what's called an open admissions policy, which means that we don't require a minimum on the ACT or a minimum GPA for transfer students. The lowest ACT score I can ever remember taking was a guy that came in with a 10. He went on to become the student president of the entire student body at Northeastern Illinois University. He got into the foreign exchange program and did a couple of semesters in Mexico because he was majoring in Spanish. Graduated with a double major and a minor, and last time I saw him, he was a regional manager for Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
Well,
So that's why we take people regardless of the ACT scores, because a standardized test can only be valid if there's a standard of education. A standard of education means the same thing they teach in Chicago public school system, where they spend $4,000 a year per student. They teach in Schaumburg, where they spend $18,000 per year per student. So, and we all know that no standard of education actually exists. Therefore, no standardized test can actually be valid. So why assist somebody with ill intentions in helping to keep our students out of school? As far as the inner city studies major is concerned, inner city studies is a combination of black studies and urban sociology. It looks at the social, political, economic, and cultural forces that has a direct impact on people that live and work in inner city communities. It is similar, I would say, to social work from an employment standpoint, in that most of our graduates either work with public social service agencies like Department of Human Services, Children and Family Services, Aging and Disability, Public Aid, etc., or they work with private social service agencies like Beatrice Caffrey, Center for New Horizons, YMCA, Boys Club, Catholic Charities, those kinds of places. Beyond that, it's dissimilar to social work probably in three primary areas. Inner city studies major is 30 hours, social work is 67 hours. Inner city studies major is taught from an African-centered viewpoint. When I say African-centered viewpoint, if I look at somebody like George Washington from a Eurocentric viewpoint, he looks like a really great guy, father of the country, military hero, first president, chopped down a cherry tree, couldn't tell a lie. But if we look at that same individual from a black viewpoint, he looks like a monster. He was a owner of slaves, he was a raper of black women, on record of having sold a black man one time for a hog head of molasses and a bottle of rum. So he doesn't look the same way through my eyes as he does through someone else's eyes. And all the courses in the inner city studies curriculum are taught from that African-centered viewpoint. Finally, it differs from social work in that social work tends to focus on individualized problems. You know, this person's a crackhead, this person abused a wife, this person abused a child. Whereas inner city studies tends to look at group problems. For example, how do you explain the fact any major city you go to in the United States, if you go to the black community, you're going to find a concentration of Arab and Korean businesses there. Doesn't matter which city you go to, Chicago, Detroit, LA, Philly, New York, Atlanta. If you go outside this country, you'll find the same setup. Me and some colleagues went to Belize in 2004. I would say 85% of the businesses in Belize are run by Arabs and Chinese. In Jamaica, I'd say 80% of the businesses are run by East Indians and Chinese. In Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya in East Africa, 90% of the businesses are run by Arabs and East Indians. So this is not something that just happens in Chicago. It's not something that just happens in this country. This is happening all over the world. Well, how do you explain such unnatural phenomena occurring on an international basis? I mean, it didn't accidentally happen, so somebody had to set it up that way. Or you could look at it like the area that the center is in. We're located at 700 East Oakwood, half block south of 39th Street, 1 block west of Cottage Grove. That area has been blighted and neglected for the last 50 years. But now all of a sudden, they just got through building some condos on the corner of Oakwood and Cottage Grove that cost $140,000 per condo. That's your apartment they call a condominium, not the whole building, just your little apartment, $250,000. So if you make $60,000, $70,000 a year, you really can't afford to live around there anymore. But that's, in essence, what the inner city studies curriculum is and what it's about. It's about promoting those conditions that are going to improve the quality of life, health, etc., for those people that live and work in inner city communities.
You're a graduate?
Yes, I got my
When?
I got my bachelor's in 1980 in inner city studies and secondary education, and then I went back and finished my master's in 1985.
All right, so you not only know from whence you speak because you read the brochure,
I know.
but you a living witness.
Yes, I am.
Right. Okay.
Yes, I
All
came
right.
to school there in September of 1976.
Okay.
And I've
All
been there
right.
ever since.
And you've been there ever since?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you're a veteran. Okay. I want to skip over and talk to Josef Ben Levi, because not only is he a professor at the Center for Inner City Studies, as is Professor Gerald Vernon. That's just, you see how hard that is on me?
You don't have to.
But not only is he a professor, but he is also connected to all of the, you could call it extracurricular if you were in a traditional institution. But in the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, we call that African-centered, or we call it holistic, because we want to work with the whole group and not just fragments of the group. And so consequently, we try to offer various things that meet different kinds of needs. So we have the Temple of the African Community of Chicago, and then we have the Kemetic Institute, and then we have the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, and probably other things that I don't know about, but let's talk about some of those.
All right. Well, the Kemetic Institute actually got started around 1989. I'm one of the founding members of the Kemetic Institute, what we call the KI. 79. And actually in 79, because I'm going back so far, and I can remember because I actually came to the center in 1976 in September 2. Mm-hmm. And the whole the whole purpose of the Kemetic Institute, where I'm the associate director, and I guess I'm trying not to remember so far back when I said 68, 69, or 88, 89, was that to introduce and promote Africa and African-centered education through the attempt to restore and to rescue Africa from the pages of European history. As Dr. John Henry Clark used to always say in terms of his meeting of Dr. Arthur Schomburg when he was head of the New York Library in his African Studies area there, that when he came to him, he asked him that he wanted to know everything there was, know about Africa right then, henceforth, forevermore, when he was a young guy, 16, 17 years old. And Professor Schomburg told him that if you want to learn African history, then you need to know world history, because African history is merely the missing pages of world history. And so part of what we do is to open up and expose Africa, particularly from the standpoint of the Nile Valley. Our foundation is the Nile Valley, or Nile Valley civilizations. Nile Valley civilizations, we mean specifically ancient Egypt, or what we call Kemet, or what they used to call Kemet, which meant the black community. Sometimes books would call it the black land, which really called the black community or the black town, and ancient Nubia, or Kush, which are the foundations of Nile Valley civilization. And by exposing that, we therefore try to show that there's a cultural connection between Nile Valley civilization and the rest of Africa, a sense of cultural continuity or cultural unity. And a lot of that goes back to our founder, Dr. Jacob H. Carruthers, from whom the Center for Inner City Studies is named after now, after he went on sabbatical and spent time with Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop at the University of Dakar, which is now Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal. And he explained to him the importance of not only going back to the Nile Valley for the foundations of the study of classical African civilizations, but how important it was for us to also learn the language of the Nile Valley, which is often called hieroglyphics. We know it as Medu-Neter now, or divine speech, that was used in order to bring out the history and the culture of African civilization. And what we've been doing in that process is revisiting the whole question of the history of the Nile Valley, so that our people might know that this is a classical African civilization, because as we like to always explain to people, when they put Egypt into the Middle East, they took Egypt out of Africa. And when Egypt was taken out of Africa, then the Africans were taken out of Egypt. And so what we're doing is placing those Africans back in Egypt. We're not talking about the Arabs who were there who didn't get there until 639 AD. We're talking about the original peoples who were there, who were recognized as African people going back. When you look at the Greek and the Roman writers, when they're talking about the Egyptians, they're talking about people who we would call today Cushites or Nubians, because that was Egypt to them. And all of the pharaohs pretty much of the Nile Valley were African people. And that includes those women who were also pharaohs, who they sometimes call queens, because they say kings and queens and use dynasties, because that is the European interpretation of history. And we're trying to show that not only did they have history, but they had philosophy. They had at least what Europeans call philosophy. They had an idea of the importance of existence, your ontology. How do you exist? They had ethics. You know, they had rules for how one should conduct themselves. So they had all of these things that are traditionally perceived to have only existed in Europe, when in fact, before Europe was even in existence, and before the earliest European civilizations, namely Greece and Rome, were in existence, all of these things were already present in the Nile Valley. And so we're trying to expose that history. And out of that, in 1984, in Los Angeles, California, we had what was called the first Ancient Egyptian Studies Conference. The first Ancient Egyptian Studies Conference was a conference that brought together a lot of African scholars who were very interested in ancient Egypt, some of whom have passed on now, like Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. John G. Jackson, and many, many others, to begin to coalesce a group of scholars to talk about, publish, and write on this subject of ancient African civilization. And out of that grew the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, to which Dr. Jacob Carruthers was the first president. He is no longer, of course, here with us, and of course we're going through some changes, but the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations has been together now for, since 1984, and the KI has been together for as long too. And in the KI, very shortly, we had two really key programs to do. One is one that we call TAA, or Teaching About Africa, which we've been doing for over 25 years, where we've actually brought in over 2,500 public school and parochial and private school teachers into our institute during the summer for an 8-week summer training program, where we actually introduce and teach them about how to go about teaching about Africa to their students. And then in the fall, we have what we call the African Forum. The African Forum is a program we have for 6 or 7 weeks, in which 6 or 7 sessions, in which we bring in various people who are African scholars and authorities to speak about contemporary issues related to the continent of Africa. Like, for example, last year when we did African Forum, we had one on the Sudan. We brought in 2 brothers from the Sudan who had been through the conflicts in Darfur, who gave a glowing and really moving explanation of what is happening with them right now. And in fact, this summer I'm teaching a course where we actually exploring the whole history and the problems of the Sudan. So that's kind of what we do, and I'm the associate director right now of the Kemetic Institute, besides my other hats that I wear. So that's kind of
it may seem to beg the question, but I think you do need to explain to our viewers why there is so much emphasis on Africa. Why are we introducing the students to Africa? Not only those who are students at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies of Northeastern Illinois University, but public school children. We're going out of our way to introduce black children, inner city children, to Africa. Why?
Well, I guess the best way to start explaining that is by looking at Carter G. Wood's 1930 book, The Miseducation of the Negro. One of the problems that has existed throughout our schools, and I think one of the reasons why a lot of times our students are not really interested in school, is that the educational process is not talking to them. When you go to school and learn about the founding fathers, or as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing properly refers to them as the fondling fathers, that our students are not learning the importance of who they are and where they come from.
Are these African students that you're teaching?
Yes.
I'm being facetious.
Yeah, I know, but
because people don't make that connection all the time.
Right. Well, the fact of the matter is, we came from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
We were brought here from Africa, and that there has always been a problem within the history of the United States in which there have been camps, or what we refer to as the integrationists versus the nationalists. For example, as I was pointing out to some students a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people know about the debate that went on between Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois, but very few people know about the debate that went on between Frederick Douglass and Martin R. Delaney. In fact, most of our students have never even heard of Martin R. Delaney. Wow. And most of them don't even become familiar with people like Martin R. Delaney or David Walker or Maria Stewart until they come to the Center for Inner City Studies and find out that these were people who were very, very instrumental in the history of the United States. They were very important people too. People like Antonin Furman, who wrote the Equality of the Races, which was a book that was written against Joseph Arthur de Gobineau's Inequality of the Human Races. Not only is that important, it's important that our students know that there's something to be proud of about Africa. That Africa had a great civilizations. There were many great civilizations. There were the great civilizations that existed in Carthage, who for a long time controlled the entire Mediterranean Sea. And the only reason why the Romans were able to even get them a navy was that they found a Carthaginian ship that had ran aground, and they copied the form of that ship to do it. But we read about Hannibal. Hannibal is shown on the History Channel, but we never see the Hannibal, what Hannibal really looked like as an African person, or that this was a great African civilization. And many other things. We know about Mali, Songhai, and Ghana, but we need to know about the other personalities that were involved in there. We need to know about what was happening in the great kingdoms of the Congo and stuff, because just because these people had Portuguese names don't mean that doesn't mean that they were Portuguese people. Many of them were Africans. Just like we have a lot of names of the British, French, German, or whatever, because of the history of those people, controlling us here during slavery. But we at the same time, we have a history too that goes back to a place and a time, and that was a very glorious history and a very positive history. And one of the things that happened when we got here is that history was taken away from us. We were conditioned to believe that we were not a people, and in order to keep a people down, a mythos has to be developed around them to convince others that they are a no people. And once their people are convinced that those people are no people, and they can be named anything they want to be named, anything can be done to them that you want to have done to them. And so we need to really know that history. Very, very important. It's very, very important. Our students need to know that.
I just feel so blessed to have this gathering here, because there's nobody sitting in these chairs who is not entirely versed in what it is they talking about. And it's just such a pleasure to just watch you go on and on. But I think I need to fade to black, because I think I got to send the professor off to the class. And then we don't have to do that. Okay, well, I just want to make sure that I don't, keep the students waiting, because I know that they have to be waiting for professors like this. And now I got to get to Lemont, because Lemont has this glorious history. Donna Gentry was telling me all this stuff about him. He's got this good old DNA, plus he just got a master's degree from Northeastern Illinois University, and somehow he managed to get a radio show that I didn't know they even had a radio station. And so I want to know something about you, because you see, we talked to the two professors, now we want to talk to the students. And you've been through it. So talk to us about your experience and how you came to choose Northeastern, and what benefit you think it may have had in your life, your career.
Well, first of all, I'm from Chicago, born and raised in a product of the Ida B. Wells housing development.
Across the street.
Right across the street.
Right.
As a matter of fact, my mother graduated from Northeastern Illinois University. And I think that was the beginning of where I'm at today, in terms of, because I remember as a little shorty, she used to bring books that had a different content on there and different colors on there, and I began to read it, and it had, some very good, even though I was in high school, it had information that I was intrigued by, because it was talking about black folks and the struggles, etc. To kind of fast forward, I had went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, to go to college as a result of being a product of Dunbar High School, and stayed there for about 10 years, etc. And to fast forward back here in Chicago, I wanted to get back in school. I was at that time I was a single parent, and I was helping my mom, who had multiple sclerosis at the time. but I knew that there was a missing component to what I wanted to do, and that was education. So I started going to city colleges, Harold Washington, and end up at King College. Then I found about a program at Chicago State, I think, Board of Governors program. Then I started doing a little research and found out that Northeastern Illinois University had such a program. And that's what hooked me. I got involved at the Board of Governors program, and as a result, came right down, right in the neighborhood, and got involved at the inner city studies. That institution, quite frankly, is not only home, but it is the embodiment of intellectual thought. It gives you an identity that, quite frankly, I didn't have before. As it relates to, you talked about the public school systems. I'm like, why am I just not learning Martin Delaney and other heroes and sheroes? But so the institution provided me with some knowledge and identity that created a hunger and a thirst to research more. And that's one of the sayings that professors have driven and trained us to research the researcher. And that concept basically is to, you are doing some investigation, you are doing some critical analysis. They provide you with strategies and tools to research information to discover some truths that you, quite frankly, didn't see. And I think the beauty of the institution also, and I'm getting excited, y'all.
Passion.
But I think the beauty of the institution, what it provides is a worldview that gives you both sides of the story. For the most part, I was used to just the European, quite frankly, perspective of the world in terms of literature and ideologies and ideas. But the center gives you an African viewpoint that is a missing component to your knowledge, to your understanding of not only who you are, but the systems and the institutions and how the world is shaped and how the world has evolved. And quite frankly, the inner city. We may think that the inner city is just there because it's just there. But there's a long variables and ideas and systematic things that has evolved to make the inner city look as it is. But so those are some of the conversations that you normally don't talk about nowhere else. And so those kind of dialogues, and it has definitely changed my way of thinking. It has given me a more progressive insight on how the world is, and also the professors there, they you know, they're not just concerned about you getting a grade. That's important, but they're concerned about the holistic person. And I think that's part of one of the big differences that I think that makes it so unique.
And I can tell that you are telling the truth because, see, you've already got your master's degree.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know you're not trying to get any points here. No. They care about us. You're not trying to get anything. You got what you went after.
No, ma'am.
Yeah. Before I let the baby speak, I just wanted to say that I too am a graduate of inner city studies education, got the master's degree in 1970. That's a long time ago, y'all. I feel you because I had exactly the same experience. I had a history, and you can regard this as boasting if you want to, but it makes a point. I had a history of having had a very good academic record before I ever got to the point at which I went to the inner city studies. And so when I came into inner city studies, one of my professors was the late Dr. Barbara Sizemore, and another one was the late Dr. Jacob H. Carruthers, and another one was the late Dr. Elkin Sitole. And I'm just telling you, this was a star-studded faculty.
Yep.
And if I was bad when I showed up, I was terrible. I was monstrous, because the thing that had been missing was the worldview. You know, and I had a lot of information, but no real lens through which to view that information and to make it make sense or not make sense. And so when I came to the Center for Inner City Studies, it was like joining a religion. I mean, I was instantly converted. And you know, when our professors would often be called upon to go to other places to give lectures and what have you, we would make them make up the classes. Now, most students, if the class is canceled because the professor's away, yay, we don't have to go to school. Not us. If the professor missed a class, we made the professor figure out a way to give us our class, because that's just how we felt. So the passion, I feel your passion, because I felt that same passion. And so my dream was to join the faculty of Inner City Studies. And when that dream was realized, you know, I was just about as happy as anybody ever been in my life. And so I taught there for 28 years, and then retiring, got, you know, granted the Professor Emeritus status, which gives me some kind of perks that I haven't ever used. But the whole point is that I was able to bask in that environment for that continuous period of time. When we had faculty meetings, you didn't miss faculty meetings, because the professors all were connected to not just the university, but to the world. So they'd be sitting there talking about conversations that they had with John Henry Clark and John G. Jackson, Sheikh Anta Diop. Because these were their colleagues, these were their peers. And so you learn things in faculty meetings. You learn things from your students, because once you unleashed that suppressed quest for knowledge in your students, they came back and kicked it up a notch. Josef Ben Levi, you know, he, Carruthers, and he founded the Kemetic Institute together. But Ben Levi had already been studying language. He had already been studying philosophy. He'd already been studying a great many things. And so he enhanced Jacob H. Carruthers. And that's what our students, it was reciprocal. Very often I used to have Kimbu come, and every class I had, every semester, Kimbu taught the first class. Because he had an overview, his research was so impeccable. What he had studied for his master's degree was so valuable that I just said, you got to come and teach this to the class. That was before he ever taught classes. So we recognized the value of each other. We knew that we were a rare set of people. And that's why I wanted the baby there. See, when I found out Donna Gentry was around here floating around, talk about going to somewhere downtown or somewhere, I thought, oh no, we need her to stay with us until she is grounded. She has gotten a very good start. And if they think she is bad now, you wait till they see her after she's had one semester. And tell us about that one semester. Did they work you? Did Anderson Thompson check you out?
Yes, Professor Thomas, I'm not going to go there. But definitely one of the things that exists that does not exist and is not tolerated at the Carruthers Center is mediocrity. You must do your best and rise to your best. There's a lot of research involved. When I went there, of course, I thought I was bad, you know. The first class I took, of course, was Professor Kimbu, who taught me you must research the researchers who's researching us. And that stayed with me, and it was a lot of work, a lot of research, information that has always been attracted to me. And it basically has validated and confirmed a lot of my own desires in that type of learning, the worldview of African, because I knew prior to coming to inner city studies that there is an African view, and I wanted to learn from that view. And of course, you grab me and say, "Look, go right here." And then when I found out all the great professors that exist there, I mean, it's like being in a candy store. You don't even know who you want, what class you want to register for, because you're like, okay, this. You don't know where you want to go, but you know that wherever you go, it's going to be sweet, and you know it's going to be challenging. And one of the things that I like about the center is that it's a research center, you know, and people don't really realize how important it is, because it's not just a college you go to. I had 8 classes at my last year at the community college, and aced them, and thought, hey, if I can do 8 classes and throw down like that, I knew 4 classes wasn't going to be, it was going to be a breeze. No, it was not like that at all. I had more work, more research, more books, books. I mean, I dreamed of books chasing me. That's how many books I had. And as soon as you get through reading one book, all right, you guys got to get this book. But it's not on the curriculum. It's not so, you know, it's needed. And so the center has nurtured a seed that was planted in me years ago, and is watering it, and it's growing. And you have to really be focused at the center. It's not a school that you can go to and think is easy. It is not like that. You have to work very, very hard at the Carruthers Center. You are being taught by top professors. I mean, just the few that's here, you know, this is the taste of, they're being nice here, but in the center they have their whips, you know. So it's made a big difference in my life, because I've always worked with children, and inner city studies major gives you not only the worldview, but it gives you the skills to articulate these things to students and inner city communities and schools. And that's one of the things that I've learned from Professor Thompson as well, is that he gave me a vocabulary to build on. And then you have classes that teach you how to write, you know, and the proper papers. So I mean, you packed when you come out of there.
Oh, yeah.
And Professor Cash sent you right to me. She had the community service component, which you had to come and do an community internship,
right.
And I inherited her.
Yes.
So it was addressing everything, and the funny thing is, she's talking about it's like being in a candy store, and everything is so sweet. I had a lot of conversations with Donna, because she was working with me as my intern for my non-for-profit organization, so I got a chance to know her very well and to talk to her a lot. So she's in the candy store, right? She got 2 shopping carts full of candy, but she is still looking over her shoulder, because she see Ben Levi over there, and she's not yet signed up for his class, but she can't wait till she consume all this candy, so she can put Ben Levi in the cart. I mean, you know, and the reputation of instructors goes around. You know, students discuss with each other what they're getting and what they like and what they dislike and how hard it is, and they moan and groan and so forth and so on. And needless to say, my colleagues are still doing the same things they were doing when I was there, which is putting the nose of these students to the grindstone. But I don't think that they mind it at all, because when you realize the benefit yourself, you know, it may be a lot of, there may be a lot of things you have to forego, you know, because for one thing, don't you think it takes a little bit for people to just become students and stop giving all their attention to television and gossip and telephones and cell phones, but actually to focus in now on goals and objectives and so forth. So it takes something to just do that. But at inner city studies, nobody is superficial and nobody's playing, because we're talking about the survival and the development of African people worldwide, and we're not playing with you.
Right. Yep.
Right.
So if you want to go somewhere and play, then you go off and find a playground. But if you show up at the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies, we're going to love you. We're going to treat you like a member of the family. But we're going to assign you your chores, and we're going to check them to see that they were done the way they was expected.
That's right.
Right.
So, you didn't talk about the Temple of the African Community of Chicago. Is that just something?
No, only because I wanted to really focus a lot on the Center for Inner City Studies in particular, and I think that it was important that, like Donna said, about doing the research and the research of the researchers, which is something we still talk about and do today. But I think it's also important for students to realize that while we put a lot of emphasis on African history and African civilizations, we also teach a lot about white studies.
Exactly.
And what I mean by that is we teach the European thinkers. We're analyzing people like Hegel. We analyzing the early Greek thinkers, Plato, Aristotle, Hesiod, John Locke. We're looking at the Second Treatise on Government. We're looking at all of these people, Thomas Jefferson's notes on the state of Virginia.
Right.
We're looking at all of this material too, and so that we can give our students what we like to call a worldview, because they need to see both sides of the fence. And surely two other things. One, yes, we have students do a lot of writing, because our students, unfortunately, and it's just not our students, this is students in general, because I teach at the other campuses too, and I realize that it's not just African American students who have trouble with their writing. You have white students who can't write. We have Latino students who can't write too. But we put such a heavy emphasis on writing by doing so much research and tearing your paper up that by the time you're done, you can write pretty good. You got some fundamental skills of writing, and what we find is that our students who go on the PhD programs come back and tell us that they were more prepared coming out of the Center for Inner City Studies to engage in doctoral research than any of the students who they are in classes with.
Would you like to hear
right
some
now.
testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
Here it is. Here it is. I left the Center for Inner City Studies in I think I graduated in 1970. And I went to Northwestern University. And the interesting thing was I went on a fellowship. And when I went to Northwestern, I was one of 20 fellows selected from all over the country to come to Northwestern on the fellowship program. So we had people one person was superintendent of schools of a whole state. We had people who were, just the movers and the shakers from wherever they came from. And I came from the inner city, from Inner City Studies Education, from the Center for Inner City Studies of Northeastern Illinois University. There was nothing wrong with my self-concept. I came in there, I knew I was ready to be at Northwestern. And I came into Northwestern, and you fill out a form, and it said, I came in 1973. They said date of graduation, they put it on the form. I put June 1975. June 1975, I was coming across the stage smiling, shaking hands, and posing in the picture. And in 2 years, I had done all of that. I had done all the coursework, written a dissertation, defended it orally, and had the PhD, which is because I was actually surprised when I got to my first class and the professor asked the students to do what they were asked to do, because it was like being in kindergarten. Does he really? Does he really want us to do this? Okay.
That's right.
And then I was in a number of schools while I was at Northwestern, because I was interested in everything. And so I was in the School of Management, and I was in huge seminar with students who had never worked in their lives, who came to school on skateboards. They weren't serious. They had people who had means, and they sent them off to the university, to do something with their time. But they, you know, they weren't serious. See, I was an older student, which is characteristic, isn't it, Kimbu?
Yes.
Older students tend to take education seriously. We came to learn and to get the credentials. We did not come to socialize. And so consequently, I sat in seminars with people who, you know, they didn't take this matter seriously. I did. And so what I'm saying is that, yes, when we go into a PhD, when you leave the Center for Inner City Studies, if you go anywhere and fail at anything, it's your fault. Because they have exposed you to everything that is out here anywhere. And if you don't want to take advantage of it, then, you know, the onus is on you.
Right. And we have a lot of people who graduated from the center that people don't know. We have state legislators who graduated from the center. There are news personalities in the city of Chicago who graduated from the Center for Inner City Studies. We have a lot of people who are in charge of major organizations and so forth who are doing a lot of great things who graduated from the Center for Inner City Studies, because one of the things that students often ask is, well, what can I do with a degree from Inner City Studies? You know, and there's a lot that you can do, but what's more important, my argument is, what can you do with a degree in finance or in business? You know,
You can do with, listen, if you have a master's degree, you can do with a master's degree what anybody with a master's degree anywhere does, which is what I did with mine, is go to one of the premier institutions in the country and come out with a PhD in 2 years. That's what you can do with a degree in inner city studies. You can apply it toward your advanced degree if you choose, or you can stop at that point and just serve the community. I mean, the community is in dire need of people who are in love with the community and who are skilled and who want to serve it. We need those kinds of people. We do not need people who are trained in institutions that are foreign to the inner city residents and who come in like some missionaries who are going to civilize savages. There aren't any savages.
There you go.
You know, so when you come in, don't come in thinking that you have children who are coming into your classroom who have no culture, who have no background, who have no potential, and you are doing them a favor by, you know, warehousing them and allowing them to have a free lunch and be indoors for a few hours a day. Don't treat our children that way. So the consequence of having people come through, you know, Northeastern Illinois University's Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies means that you have people who are capable of being dedicated and devoted to their own, and therefore to go the extra mile, to go way beyond the call of duty. You know, I think it's true to say, because it was my experience for 28 years as a professor, and before that, the 2 years that I spent as a student, I think it is safe to say that the faculty goes far beyond what is necessary to teach the class.
Yes, yes.
Because when they say research, the researchers, not only are they going to be doing their own research, but when a student comes up with a topic, they're going to research what the student is saying and check that out. And if the sources don't line up, you know, and if you get some plagiarism or some other kinds of funny business going on, they'll call you out and tell you about it.
That's one of the things.
Send you back to the drawing board, you know. And you don't think they're not well read. Do not think that you're going to slide something past.
No,
they're not having that.
No, that's one of the things at Carruthers Center that that each professor is very, very serious. They do not tolerate plagiarism. And as you were saying about the community and our children, you know, inner city studies is education, the College of Education as well. And I think that any teacher that is teaching in inner city schools should be should have to take some classes and get familiar with inner city studies, because it gives you as Professor Kimbu was talking about, the sociology methods and things of that nature, so we know what we're dealing with in these children in the cities. And so when you're teaching students that's in the inner city, you need the techniques and the skills and the tools and understanding of what you're doing.
You need to understand the social forces that are impinging on these children and stop doing victim analysis, saying,
Exactly.
well, they come from broken homes, they're illegitimate, their parents didn't graduate, they got a high crime rate. We don't want to hear that. If you think the children in the inner city are hopeless, then stop collecting a check for pretending that you're teaching them. If you don't think they're educable, then why are you punching in? Why do you have some keys in your hand to a classroom door?
Well, you know, a lot of this stuff, to me, comes from a sense of what Amos Wilson refers to as falsified consciousness.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't go there.
In other words, we were African people when white folks stole us and brought us over here and turned us into what they've turned us into. And I always ask the question, well, when did we stop being Africans? At what point did we stop being who we were and turn magically into something else? You don't change who you are because you change geographic locations. But this whole notion of falsified consciousness, the fact that we have been stripped of our history, of our culture, we suffer from something called falsified consciousness, or something called historical and cultural amnesia. So we've forgotten who we are and what our way is. And in place of who we are and what our way is, we have been given a plethora of images to choose from. You can be a N-word, you can be a thug, you can be a gangster, you can be a hoochie, you can be a B-word, you can be you can be 50 Cent on the one hand or Clarence Thomas on the other hand. It really doesn't matter because all of them work for the same interests. And so what we need to do is to figure out who we really are and stop pursuing our interests and to make a clear distinction between our interests and other people's interests that don't look like us, don't act like us, don't have our interests in heart.
You're absolutely right about that.
And so one of the things we have there is we have the Illinois Transatlantic Slave Trade Commission, which is doing research on the transatlantic slave trade and the implications of the transatlantic slave trade psychologically, historically, sociologically, politically, on us as a people. And this is a major research project that we are involved in to correct some of the things that Kimbu is talking about, that we're trying to make people aware of this. And a lot of research has been done, a tremendous amount of research has been done. And not only are we just doing it in Illinois, we're doing it in the United States and we're doing Africa too, because we're also looking at the trans-Saharan slave trade.
Right. That never gets talked about.
Which is hardly ever talked about.
And still going on.
And still going on today. You know, when we're talking about that 1,000 years before the Europeans even got involved in the trade, what the Arabs were doing and what they're still doing and what's happening in the Sudan and in the Darfur and in Chad is nothing but an extension of that process. It never stopped. You know, going on. So we're doing a lot of research. We do a lot of research. And the thing you talked about, the whole idea of victim analysis, most students, black students who go to colleges and universities, when they go to school and they do research, generally they are doing research about themselves. They are doing victim analysis research, and they always come from the perspective that the problem is us. Nobody is ever doing victimizer research, because you can't have a victim without a victimizer. And so nobody's ever analyzing the victimizer. So we're doing victimizer research. And when students come to us and we start talking about this, the victimization process, they're almost thrown back, because they've been, you know, conditioned to research themselves in the interest of other people rather than researching those people in the interest of themselves. And when they start looking at them, we start asking them the questions about looking at European thought processes, European history, not the way it used to be, you know, to look at the fact that the Greeks and the Romans were here first. We asked the question, well, when was Homer written? And let's look at Homer, and let's look at all of the Africanness that's written in Homer and what he's talking about, African people. And when did that get written, by the way? And let's look at when did that was written and what was written 2,000 years before then. Now, who was writing that 2,000 years ago? You know, and when Homer shows up and how they, you know, you know, Diodorus and some, you know, talked about how the gods used to go on vacation. The Greek gods used to go on vacation in Ethiopia. Oh, you mean tell me there was no place for them to go on vacation in Greece? That they had to go to Ethiopia? Why did they go to Ethiopia? You know, why was it that Herodotus talked about the fact that the ancient Egyptians had black skin and woolly hair, and that the European writers would say, well, he was lying when he said that? Okay, he was lying, but he saw him. He was looking at him, but you weren't there. He was there. You know, and how he talked about the Greeks learning their various gods and their deities from ancient Egypt. And some of these many other things that other Greek writers have said. You know, and when we look at people like Thales, who said that the foundation of all life was in water, which in Kemet was called noon, and he was recognized as the first Greek philosopher, but he wasn't even a Greek, but he's co-opted by the Greeks. So we look at all this stuff too. It's, you know, and by showing all this, we give people what we call the world view, the African world view, because it is a world view. But we also want to put the world in its proper perspective.
Exactly.
You know, we don't want people to get confused about, you know, what was first, the chicken or the egg. You know?
Well, you know, we're drawing close to the end of the program, and I just wish we could just stay here and do a lot more of this. I just wanted to edit a little bit, because I would be missing my calling if I didn't edit, and that is when we use the past tense, Kimbu, you know, we were stripped. No, we are being. See, it is a continuous process, and I know you know this is true, which is why it is necessary for the continuous process of educating our people so that they will know thyself, so they will know who they are, they will know from whence they came, they will know their glorious history, they will aspire to be what they have been, rather than, as you say, all of these images that are presented to them that they can choose from these lower images. They can choose from loftier images once they see themselves in the mirror of culture. And so it's very important for us to understand that this is ongoing, that every minute of every day, 24/7, they are eroding the culture of our people. They are continuing to take down, to dumb us down, you know, to do whatever it takes to keep people oppressed and in captivity. The slave trade is not just the buying and selling on the auction block. The slave trade is when you rob people of their identity and you have them doing your bidding, adhering to your will, and they are unable to be self-determining, and so they are in fact functioning in your interest. They are operating in your best behalf. But with warriors like you on the case, see, I know perfectly well we'll have less to worry about than we would if we didn't have, you know, the Northeastern Illinois University Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies. And I'm just very, very pleased that Donna Gentry has chosen to go there, that Kimbu Kali has chosen to stay there, and that Lemont Baker, I don't know what you're going to do with your life, young man, but you strapped.
Okay.
You know, you packing,
PhD,
so you come on. PhD, well, that's right, that's right. And then, of course, Josef Ben Levi can't wait to get in the classroom. He just brimming over. He can't wait to get to his students, and they can't wait to get to him. I'm very happy that you came out to make this case, and I hope that this does a lot toward making the Carruthers Center for Inner City Studies at 700 East Oakwood Boulevard at the corner of Langley and Oakwood, which is a block from 39th Street, for those who don't recognize it, Oakwood Boulevard.
And we have student organizations there
And
as
we
well.
have student organizations,
That's right.
and you are the what, a senator or something?
I'm a senator and the president of UTATU at Northeastern University Carruthers Center. We just started that
Okay.
student organization because if it's tough, we need to help each other to get through it. So we formed a club, a student organization, to help us assist each other in economic